Hey guys, it's Ashley Francis with Blue Sage Counseling and Wellness, and today I'm going to talk about another heavily underrepresented area of mental health, and that is the connection between sleep and mental health. One of our most favorite things that we love to do, but simply just don't get enough of. So today I'm going to talk about why it's a problem, not getting enough sleep or sleeping too much as it pertains to mental health. And then I'm also going to talk about how it affects mental health. So I'll give you some specifics around the biology and the neurology behind what's really going on when we're not getting enough sleep and how it's affecting our mood. So we'll get really specific about that. And then finally, I will also provide some practical, tactical strategies and tips that you can start implementing right away to make sure that you are getting better quality sleep. Let's just dive right on. I'm tongue-tied today. Let's dive right in. So why is this important? Why do we even need to be talking about it? Well, it's prevalent. It's not rocket science to figure out that there is a correlation between lack of sleep and a poor mood or the inability to concentrate, or we have less patience. Anyone that has had a newborn knows this better than anyone. It's not a mystery, guys, that when we don't get enough sleep, it has an effect on our mood. So this is something that everybody can relate to. It's pretty much universal. And it's also important to note that the most common mental health illnesses in this country are anxiety and depression, affecting anywhere upwards of 40 million people. It's also prevalent within the mental health community as well because it just affects so many of us. The statistics have shown that anywhere between 50 to 90% of people with mental illness are also experiencing sleep disorders. I'm going to say that again. 50 to 90% of people that are struggling with mental health issues are also experiencing sleep disorders. So this is a big deal. And what we've also found from some scientific studies is that they are reciprocally related and there is a causal relationship. In other words, what that basically means is it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. Which one came first or which one's causing which? Is it the sleep disorder that's causing the mental illness, or is it the mental illness that's causing the sleep disorder? What we have found is that they actually both have linkages and causes for one another. For example, if you're struggling with anxiety, you've got a 50 to 90% chance that you're also suffering from a sleep disorder as well. But also on the other hand, if you're experiencing a sleep disorder, such as insomnia or hypersomnia, you're also at a 50 to 90% chance of experiencing a mental health disorder as well. The trouble here is that we don't have a whole lot of data, a whole lot of evidence to explain why that's happening. But nonetheless, we do know that the causation, the relationship is there. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that's enough for me to care and pay attention and to really try and make this area a little bit better. Also, there are roughly about 70 different sleep disorders. 70. And they all fall under the category of something related to insomnia or hypersomnia, but also sleep apnea. A lot of airway obstructed types of disorders are thrown in there too, and that's something that is largely understated as well. It's a problem. That's why we need to be talking about it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is how it affects mental health, one of which is emotional integration. So throughout the day, we are experiencing a variety of emotions. We're taking in vast amounts of information. We are also developing memories. And all of that information has got to be stored. It needs to go somewhere in the brain. And the brain is really good at being able to do this throughout the day. But then there's this cleansing exercise that needs to happen while we sleep, in that deep restorative sleep that allows all of those things to go into the different file folders of the brain in order to result in a healthy brain and healthy feelings and behaviors. But if we are not getting enough sleep, then that processing and integration is not happening. So what will wind up happening is that the emotions and the information and the memories that didn't get properly processed that day are going to carry over into the next day and then the next day, and then the next day. And over time, that can result in a mental health disorder. And that's not good. So it has a lot to do with emotional integration, big time. The next one is emotional stability. The two parts of the brain that are responsible for a lot of emotional regulation and processing are the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. The amygdala, when we don't get enough sleep, the amygdala has a tendency to go into overdrive, which will result in a lot of mood swings and irritable behavior. You become very emotionally reactive and become quite hypersensitive. There's also a study that showed that there were some MRI images that were taken of brains of people that were sleep deprived, and it showed that 60% of the sleep deprived folks were having the amygdala light up in their brain. So that basically is saying that when you're sleep deprived, you are more likely to be emotionally reactive and hypersensitive just because of that. The prefrontal cortex is sort of like the voice of reason part of the brain. It helps to pump the brakes on the amygdala. It also helps to control our impulses. So if the amygdala is going haywire and it's in overdrive, then it gives the prefrontal cortex a really, really big job to be able to try and regulate all of that. And sometimes it just doesn't work. These two things need to work in tandem. Giving yourself enough sleep can help reduce that emotional reactivity in the amygdala. It makes the prefrontal cortex happy and results in healthy emotional regulation. The next thing is hormone disruption. So we have roughly about 50 hormones in our body, and that makes up the endocrine system or parts of the endocrine system. And all of these hormones have specific duties and jobs. The hypothalamus is the part of the body that is responsible for keeping balance. More notably, it's responsible for the regulation of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. What has been found is that when the cortisol levels are high, then it knocks everything out of balance. It's known to also regulate the fight or flight response. So if cortisol levels are high, then it's going to result in anxiety. You're going to have that want to jump out of your skin kind of feeling, or you want to run out of the room and just not really sure why. That's what the fight or flight response is responsible for. If we're not getting enough sleep consistently over time, it increases that level of cortisol and it leads to a state of chronic stress. And that's not good for the overall state of health, but in particular our mental health as well, and typically will result in insomnia. So if you've got a super high level of stress in your life, especially right now during COVID, you might be overworking. It's a lot easier for us to stay in front of our computers and not take breaks. That can have a cumulative effect in increasing our cortisol levels, lack of exercise, all of these things. It's the perfect storm for increasing those levels of cortisol, which is putting you into a chronic state of stress, which is also, or can rather, result in insomnia. So that's the relationship there. And the symptoms of that are impaired thinking, weight gain, the inability to control your emotions, and it also can result in a negative feedback loop. And this is something that we talk about as it pertains to anxiety and depression in particular, that there's some faulty thinking there. There are some thoughts and feelings that have formed a perspective that is either illogical or irrational. It's just overall not healthy. When our cortisol levels are high and our thinking is impaired, then we're more likely to hit that tripwire of the negative feedback loop and get stuck there. And a lot of that just has to do with the fact that our brain and our body are in such a sensitive state that it's really hard for us to be able to regulate that on our own by just like adjustments from thought alone. Whereas if we do the types of things to reduce the cortisol, then it becomes a lot easier to be able to practice positive thinking. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about cortisol. Here are some key facts just to keep in mind. Sleep disorders are more common among the mentally ill. Lack of sleep can worsen mental illness and make it more difficult to cope with symptoms. It's very likely that treatment for sleep disorders will alleviate symptoms of mental health disorders. That's right, alleviate the symptoms. Those with mental health disorders often spend time in lighter, less restorative stages of sleep. like REM sleep, which is critical to health and healing. So basically what that translates into is difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, you wake up multiple times a night, and also waking up earlier than you wish to. And here's the most important fact. Out of all of this is what is most important, is that the lack of sleep can actually be very dangerous if it is untreated. There was a study done by the University of Michigan that showed a very strong correlation between insomnia and suicide. So we really need to take this serious, guys. If you're not getting enough sleep, it's inevitably having effects on our hormones, on our neurochemicals, our body chemicals, and it's just making it harder for us to function. Now, finally, let's talk about what are some of the things that we can do to improve sleep. So one of which is lifestyle changes. The big three that we're concerned about here are limiting or eliminating the intake of caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol. Now, I know some of you are going to hear that and say, absolutely not. I'm not giving up my caffeine. I'm certainly not giving up alcohol. But the idea here is just simply to make sure that you're monitoring it, that you're having these things in moderate consumption. Yes, it would be best to eliminate it altogether, but that's just not realistic. I know that I could probably give up caffeine, but giving up, a glass of wine here and there, it's not going to happen. So the point is just to reduce it, but most importantly is just to make sure that you're not consuming those types of things a few hours before bed, obviously, because these things are going to rev you up. So the first is lifestyle changes. The second is physical activity. Studies have shown that it's the aerobic exercise that helps us to fall asleep faster, and we also get better quality of sleep as well. Making sure, once again, we get 150 minutes a week, however you slice it or dice it. Just make sure that that's what you're getting. The aerobic exercise are things that are getting your heart rate up for an extended period of time, that's allowing you to sweat. This could be brisk walking, power walking, HIIT training, jogging, tennis, all kinds of different types of sports. Just make sure you're getting that aerobic exercise in. The next thing is sleep hygiene. So these are the little tricks that you can do to make your room and your bed a more conducive sleep environment. The first thing is to have no screens. So no exposure to your television screen, iPad, your laptop, your phone, because it's emitting a blue light. Most of us are pretty aware of this blue light and the effects that it can have on us, especially during COVID. We have excessive exposure to screens, so just make sure that you're powering down and you don't have exposure to the screens at least an hour before you are starting to go to sleep. The next thing is to have a totally dark room. So here's an interesting fact, is that even the slightest little piece or little bit of light, there's a part of the brain that can actually pick up on that. It will take that in, and it will know that the light is there, and it can send the signals off of, should I be awake or should I be asleep? Try to make your room as dark as possible. Getting into a wake and go to sleep routine by waking up at the same time each day and then also going to sleep at the same time each day really helps to set the circadian rhythm, which is exactly what we're describing. And it allows the body systems to have something that is reliable and predictable to go off of. And it just helps to induce sleep and to induce restful sleep as well, just a lot easier without any sort of accommodations. The next thing is to allocate your room and your bed only for sleep and sex. Those are the only things that should be happening in your bed. You shouldn't be working in your bed. You shouldn't be hanging out there. And there again, it's a judgment call. Just make sure that you're minimizing it and that you have a predominant association with sleep and sex. And then the last thing is to make sure that the environment is cold. So there have been a lot of studies about the efficacy of having a cold room while we sleep. And the reason for that is because it helps to put the brain and the body into an incubation stage, so that it helps to bring down the heart rate, bring down the breath rate. It just brings all the systems down easier, so it's not up to you to have to do all of that. Just the cold environment in and of itself can be able to bring all those systems down for you. And it just helps with all of that information and memory and emotional processing as well. I read an article that said 60 degrees is what's recommended. I think that is ridiculous. Personally, I set mine to 68. Of course, everybody's home is going to be a little bit different in terms of the feel versus the temperature. Do what feels good to you, but really a good rule of thumb is that you're warm under the covers, but you're cold out of the covers. Again, this is going to be a judgment call. Not everyone is going to be comfortable with that, but try it. See how it goes. That is what's recommended. And the next is relaxation techniques. So any client of mine knows that I'm a big fan of the relaxation techniques. I teach them all day long, believe in them wholeheartedly. So these things are meditation, specifically guided meditation can be really helpful when you're going to sleep. Also guided imagery, some deep breathing exercises, as well as progressive muscle relaxation. And if you have any questions about those, just let me know. And the last one is CBT, which stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. Many of you are already receiving cognitive behavioral therapy. You may not know it, but basically it is a treatment approach that focuses on the connection between our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So in other words, the patterns that we have between our thoughts and our feelings likely are going to predict our perspective, which is going to dictate our behavior. What we find specifically with anxiety and depression is that as we were saying earlier, that there are some faulty negative feedback loops there that need to be ironed out. We just need to take this whole jumbled mess and pull each little piece apart one at a time to figure out, where did this thought come from? How is it resulting in this feeling? How does it translate into this behavior? Oftentimes, much of these things are happening on the lower level, and we're not even aware that we're doing it. CBT it's a cluster of conversations to be able to uncover what is working on the inside, on the lower levels, bring those things to light so that we can start restructuring them, which results in just overall a better outlook and just being happier and also alleviating those mental health symptoms. And it helps to build your confidence, and it helps to change those negative expectations, but most importantly, it also helps to blame ourselves less. You may be struggling with some mental health symptoms, and by actually getting good sleep and adjusting your diet and getting good exercise, these are all the things that we need to do to be able to create the body or put the body into a conducive environment so that it functions at its best. So it is optimally functioning. And we're doing ourselves these favors on the lower end, the things that we can't see, that then translate into making better choices. It just makes it easier for us to be less emotionally reactive and to make better choices throughout the day. That translates into enriching our relationships, which even goes further to be more productive in our careers. Point is, this is all related. Everything is related, thus holistic psychotherapy, right? That will do it for today. That's today's talk on the connection between sleep and mental health. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Please feel free to ask me questions at any time. I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. Go ahead and click the like button and also subscribe to our channel to see more videos like this. Take care, guys.